So earlier this year, I became something of a proponent of the lab leak hypothesis to explain the origins of SARS-CoV-2, i.e. COVID-19. And I don't know so much about that opinion now. I think I've been reading a lot about this subject more recently, and there's articles in Nature and articles in The Guardian that seem to be indicating that it could very likely have come from a natural zoonotic source due to the destruction of animal habitats and rainforests to make way for things like farms and mines. And but it's just a coincidence that it emerged in Wuhan. However, having said that, that facility in Wuhan, the Wuhan Institute of Virology, is still the only biosafety level 4 facility in China. It's the only facility of its kind in China, and it studies coronaviruses in bats. I've mentioned also elsewhere that there's a very distinct racial profile when it comes to the deadliness of these coronaviruses is far more deadly to South Asians than to East Asians. So that would explain the low death rates due to COVID-19 in China. And it just seems to me as though what was really going on in this lab was it was the creation of a bioweapon, and a bioweapon to be used specifically for India and Pakistan, I suspect. If nuclear tensions were to escalate in that part of the world, they could just chuck some COVID over the border and sort of dampen the tensions that way, maybe, or distract them somehow with the pandemic, or distract from those tensions using a pandemic as a means of doing that, or conducting bio-warfare with India. And that seems to me to be more likely, and I just can't get over this fact that it emerged in Wuhan, of all places, where there is this facility, and lots of other people can't seem to get over that fact either. And when it comes to the science behind this lab leak hypothesis, or theory possibly, even if there's some supporting evidence for it, which there is, it's not being ruled out by the WHO, it's not being ruled out by any serious scientific commentator, I don't think. And I think the real problem with it is that there is no sort of zoonotic, there's no reservoir of zoonotic sources, i.e. animal sources for the virus. So we don't know which animal this came from, we don't know how it evolved to leap from one animal to another. And then I hear the other day on Russell Brand's YouTube channel, or today rather on Russell Brand's YouTube channel, that there's these leaked documents now that state that the US and Wuhan scientists were developing new coronaviruses 18 months prior to the COVID-19 outbreak. And well, what does that seem to suggest? It seems to suggest that it was created by scientists in a lab, for goodness sake. As just one more little bit of evidence, I'm going to read this article from The Week, which does give a very fair analysis, I think, of this, and doesn't just tip over into saying that it most certainly came from that lab, but here we go. A team of scientists from Wuhan and the US outlined plans to create a new coronaviruses just over 18 months before the COVID-19 outbreak was reported in China, leaked documents have revealed. The researchers submitted a grant application in March 2018 to the US Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, DARPA, that outlined a $14.2 million project aimed at diffusing the threat of bat-borne coronaviruses. The proposal included a proposal to study potentially dangerous pathogens over the Atlantic by generating full-length infectious bat coronaviruses in the lab and asserting genetic features that could make coronaviruses better able to infect human cells. The grant application was submitted by British zoologist Peter Daszak on behalf of a consortium, but was vetoed. In the letter of rejection, DARPA explained that the proposal hardly addressed or discussed the ethical, legal and social issues associated with the experiment. I will pause here and state that most of what DARPA does, as I understand it, is highly secretive. So it doesn't really stack up quite so much in my mind that they would just reveal to everybody that they're working on biowarfare projects. I mean, I think there's the assumption made in most circles that when it comes to classified US government projects, biowarfare is part of that agenda, and that research into biowarfare does occur, and that most global superpowers undertake this sort of research fairly routinely, but they don't talk about it, and it all remains classified. So when DARPA puts out in official papers that they rejected, they put out an official letter of rejection, what evidence is there really to suggest that they weren't secretly working on that anyway? It doesn't stack up in my mind that they wouldn't be, and I suspect that there are labs out there certainly that work on biowarfare projects, and if there aren't, well, then maybe there should be, even because it should be part of the defence agenda of any developed nation to figure out, or try to figure out, how to defend against biowarfare attacks. So that strikes me as being a little bit hard to believe that DARPA would have rejected it. The article continues. All the same, said The Atlantic, the leaked application seems to be almost tailor-made to buttress one specific theory of a laboratory origin, that SARS-CoV-2, the virus that causes COVID-19, wasn't simply brought into a lab by scientists and then released by accident, but rather pieced together in a deliberate fashion. An anonymous whistleblower handed the grant documents to guerrilla lab leak snoops, Drastic, a group of internet activists investigating the origins of pandemics. Wuhan scientists have repeatedly rejected claims that COVID-19 was created in a lab in a Chinese city at the epicenter of the first outbreak. A genetics expert working with the World Health Organization told the Daily Telegraph that if the virus had been produced by scientists, it would explain why a close match has never been found in nature. Well, it would indeed do that. A WHO collaborator who has not been named said that in such a scenario, scientists would take various sequences from similar coronaviruses and create a new sequence that is essentially the average of them. It would be a new virus sequence, not a 100% match to anything. To date, the closest match found to the genetic makeup of COVID-19 is that of a virus strain called Banal 52. What a curious name for a virus. Banal 52. Like the banality of evil. Goodness me, whatever. Which was discovered among bats dwelling in limestone caves in northern Laos last month and shares 96.88% of the genome. Okay, Science journal Nature reported at the time that researchers say that parts of their genetic code bolster claims that the virus behind COVID-19 has a natural origin, but according to the Telegraph, scientists expect a direct ancestor to be around a 99.98% match, and none has been found so far. The leaked proposal does not provide conclusive evidence that the virus that caused the pandemic emerged from a lab, said Intercept. Several scientists told the US news site that knowledge of its existence has shifted the train of the debate, however. The information in the proposal certainly changes my thoughts, said Martin Wikelski, a director at Germany's Max Planck Institute of Animal Behavior, whose work was referenced in the grant application. In fact, he added, a possible transmission chain is now logically consistent, which it was not before I read the proposal. But other experts continuing to debunk the lab origins claims, pointing out that most of the genetic engineering work proposed in the application was to be carried out in North Carolina rather than China. Given that the work wasn't funded and wasn't proposed to take place in Wuhan anyway, it's hard to assess any bearing of the origin of SARS-CoV-2, Stephen Goldstein, an evolutionary geneticist at the University of Utah, told The Intercept. Natural origin remains the most plausible explanation, concluded The Atlantic, but the recent leak reveals a toxic shroud of secrecy surrounding such research that has fueled conspiracy theories, the site added. This steady drip of revelations has sustained an atmosphere of profound unease as the battle to contain COVID-19 continues. Well, it would, wouldn't it? It would create an attitude of unease since there's so much secrecy involved, and we know that governments work on things like this. We know that governments work on biowarfare projects. So, we know also that within the WIV, the Wuhan Institute of Virology, there was like there were other strains of coronaviruses which were very closely related to SARS-CoV-2, which could have formed a sort of virological ancestor to SARS-CoV-2, and it could lend plausibility to the notion that it was created in a lab. Engineering work was proposed, the application was carried out in North Carolina rather than China. I'm just going to Google where this other lab that has links to, this American lab that has links to the Wuhan Institute of Virology. Wikipedia. It has links to the Galveston National Laboratory. Oh, that's in Texas. Okay. It's not in North Carolina. I wonder where the Galveston National Laboratory has links to. Affiliations. No, I should really do more research into. I'll quickly read this out. Virus origin allegations. This is on the Wuhan Institute of Virology's Wikipedia page. The laboratory has been the focus of conspiracy theories and unsubstantiated speculation about the origin of the virus. It's been a source of the political tension between China and other countries, including Australia and the United States. There have been allegations that the initial outbreak was provoked either by manipulation or accidental release of a virus held in the WIV facilities, and that the participants may have conspired to cover it up. Xi Zhengli denied that there was a connection between the WIV and the emergence of COVID-19. In February 2021, after investigations in Wuhan, the WHO team said that the laboratory leak origin for COVID-19 was extremely unlikely, confirming what experts expected about the likely origins and early transmission. In response to the report, politicians including Joe Biden and Boris Johnson, as well as WHO Director General Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus, have called for further investigations into the origins of COVID-19. The scientific opinion that an accidental leak is possible, but unlikely, has remained steady. Yeah, and I suppose it would do until it all sort of calms down, and then like 14 or 15 years later, the zoonotic chain of events suddenly emerges once everyone's sort of, forgotten about it all. I suppose that's likely to be what would go on there. It's such bullshit, it really is. I mean, did it come from that lab? Yeah, it blatantly did. It blatantly came from that fucking lab, obviously, but... And then I read in The Guardian, of all places, that it came from, like, destroyed rainforests and animal territories that have been converted to farms and mines. But it's sort of somehow got into a horseshoe belt and sort of somehow got into this and that and the other and COVID, yeah. And the same thing happened with SARS and MERS, and the same thing happened with Ebola and everything else, and that this is just like the latest iteration of that chain of events. I just don't quite buy it. The reason I don't quite buy it is because it seems as though, for one thing, COVID-19 was released on several different occasions in the same place, i.e. in Wuhan. It seems to me as though it were engineered deliberately to cause a high probability of death among South Asians, and to cause a far lower probability of death among the Chinese. To i.e. protect Chinese citizens from the virus itself, and to make it deadly for Indians. That's dots, not feathers. But then again, I don't know. I'm not an epidemiologist or a virologist. So maybe I shouldn't really be talking like this about the old COVID, the old SARS-CoV-2. But it seems as though all the facts aren't quite in yet, and that the lab leak theory is on the table. And yes, serious scientists are saying that it's certainly plausible, at least. I want to read another article that I read in the Wall Street Journal, which was an opinion piece given by a physicist and an author of a book about the pandemic. But I think it might be a little bit beyond the scope for this video, but I'll put a link to this article entitled "Science Closes In on COVID's Origins" in the description of this video, for you to peruse at your leisure. So, yeah, I think I'll close up this video by saying, we don't know yet, which is basically the consensus. How do I butt the consensus? I bet it came from that lab. I bet it came from that lab, and any sort of effort to, in many years in the future, when all the data's in, I bet the data would have been fudged or fabricated to some extent to cover up the fact that it came from that lab one way or another. It was either released deliberately or it was released as a result of fuck up and human fuck up and human incompetence. And it'll just be to sort of protect China, sort of protect the United States, who seem to have been involved in this also, and whose own biosafety level 4 facilities seem to have pretty close links with the WIV, the Chinese one. And it has the hallmarks, in my opinion, of a bioweapon. So there we go, everyone. Thank you very much for watching. Bye bye bye. I love you lots.